All right, let's talk a little bit about gender disparities in expectations for marriage. For women, a lot of times when they're thinking about marriage and a close relationship, they're thinking about intimacy in terms of, talking about things and expressing their emotions and being supported in that, kind of like they do with their girlfriends, right? That they can talk about their hopes and dreams and you know, oftentimes they can talk about things that can't actually be fixed, but just talking about it makes you feel better because you talked about it and somebody else acted sympathetic while they heard it. Men are more likely to define intimacy as, being there when somebody actually needs your help, or being there with somebody and sharing some experiences, or being together, right? Like you'll notice it has a lot to do with just sort of being present rather than, this more feminine approach of, talking a lot and sharing a lot verbally. So for men, like their best friends oftentimes are people who they were in the military with, or people who they were on a sports team with, or somebody who they like to go camping with, or something like that. Their rock climbing partner, something like that, where they've shared experiences. The more life threatening, oftentimes the more bonding. And so that's why the examples I gave have this like risk of injury or death. Like that makes for better close relationships for men. They can really rely on each other, especially if they had to rely on each other. Like that makes for a relationship for between men typically. So, because men and women have sort of these different expectations about what it means to be intimate in a relationship, men are really likely to have their intimacy needs met by just normal wifely behavior. Her being there, her sharing experiences with him, her, giving him practical help, watching the same shows with him. Those are the same memes with him, those kinds of things. I noticed that my husband recently has started getting a little bit jealous that my son shows me memes and that my husband doesn't get why they're funny. And my son and I will laugh at them. And I can see him going, he's being left out of a shared experience, is what I think is going on. And he doesn't get, like, he doesn't want to see the memes. He just wants me not to get them. I think he's like, no, you and I are the ones who share experiences. Don't be having a shared experience with our son. That's not right. But I think my son and I have similar senses of humor, and that's why we both think it's funny. But so normal sort of wifely behavior will fulfill what men are looking for in a marriage, whereas for women, they are more likely to be frustrated with a male partner who doesn't want to talk about the things that she wants to talk about and who doesn't want to, have these kinds of emotional moments. In fact, a lot of husbands, as a woman, I find this very demeaning, will say about their wives that she's too emotional. And kind of it's too much to carry for a man to be hearing, that a woman's scared or she's unhappy or that and that he can't fix it in particular, that as the husband, he can't fix it. So there's not only like this mismatch and she may not get her needs met, she might actually have her needs sort of pushed aside because they aren't needs that make sense to her male partner. So that's kind of this mismatch can cause unhappiness. But one of the things you'll notice for a lot of women is that they'll maintain friendships with other females even as they're in a heterosexual marriage, because women pretty quickly start figuring out, if I want to have a lot of talking and support and like that, I better get it from my girlfriends, because it's not probably going to come from my husband who loves me so much but really doesn't want to hear about it. So that's kind of a gender mismatch, that's for sure, or a sex mismatch, I should say. How about marriage and health? I have a couple of different graphics to show you that are asserting something. I got a little bit of contradiction I have to do, and we'll just go back and forth. So here is research from earlier, 10 years ago. They haven't updated this yet, so I don't know if it's changed at all. But the current health status of different people, so the current health status is represented by, are you experiencing excellent or very good health? that's the darkest bar, are you in good health? Or in the orange, are you in fair or poor health? And you'll notice that in the married column, you have the smallest orange area where the person, that the person who's responding to the survey is very unlikely to be experiencing fair or poor health, followed by the never marrieds and the living with a partner. Then you got divorced or separated, and then the widoweds have the highest fair or poor. Now I want to qualify some of that by showing, oops, that is not what I wanted to show you. Where is it? Nope, that is not. Oh, well, apparently I don't have the graphic I thought I was going to show you, because I was going to point out that, the never marrieds and the living with a partner are probably on average younger than the marrieds, right? Because if you've never been married, it might be because you're 18 to 30 or something like that and haven't gotten married yet. If you're living with a partner, you're probably 18 to 30 on average, and haven't gotten married yet. So if you consider that the people who are married are probably on average older than the never marrieds and the living with a partner, it really drives home that 10.8% having fair or poor health compared to almost 15% for the other two groups, and they're on average younger probably. Now, the other thing I have to say is that, the divorced or separated are probably on average older than the marrieds, and that the widoweds are probably significantly older on average than the marrieds, and significantly older than the never marrieds and the living with a partner. So we have to keep age in mind as we look at this graphic. But nevertheless, marriage does pan out as having benefits for physical health and then also for mental health. That's what this picture is showing us. So we have in the far left bars people who are married. We have the next group. They're calling it de facto married instead of cohabiting. They are then the next group talking about people who are separated or divorced. And then we have on the far right people who are currently engaged to get married. And so what you'll find is that for the different psychological issues, anxiety in the gray bar, depression in the red bar, panic attack in the blue bar, and stress in the green bar, you'll see that the married couples have the lowest bars for all of those things. The engaged couple has the highest level of stress out of everybody. Apparently it's quite stressful to be getting ready to get married. But you'll notice that the anxiety and depression are higher at all the other statuses compared to married, and that panic attacks are higher. So anxiety, panic attack are two parts of the same class of disorders. Depression's pretty close to anxiety. It's the backside of it. And then stress is sort of just like what's going on in life. It looks like altogether married people are buffered in these cases, right? Like being married is beneficial for coping in these situations, especially with stress. Probably factors that contribute to lower levels of stress include probably on average the married couples are making more money, and so they don't have that stress to the degree the other groups do. And then by having lower levels of stress, you can actually buffer yourself from the symptoms of other disorders. So why does marriage contribute to greater health? Okay, I made a little flow chart for it. So for one thing, healthy people may attract mates more easily. So it may be a self-selection issue, that if you already are healthy, it makes it more likely that you can find a mate who wants to marry you. Once you're married, on average, people adopt a healthier, safer lifestyle than non-married people. One of the biggest contributing factors to poorer health among the never married and the cohabiting is higher rates of infectious disease. They're out doing more contact behaviors that could lead to lifelong health risks that go along with infectious disease. Spouses provide health care. One of the best ways to recover quickly and well is to not have to hang out at the hospital, where you could catch MRSA, or you could get bed sores that get infected, and other kinds of things that can happen when you're in the hospital, right? Being able to go home, it perks you up, it puts you in a better mindset, those kinds of things. So having a spouse who can make it possible for you to not have to stay in the hospital is an advantage. On average, married couples enjoy a higher standard of living, as I already mentioned, and that there is a really strong correlation between standard of living and health. Very consistent correlation between amount of income, where the person lives, those kinds of things, and then health. And then, having a mate gives you company and gives you social support. And, we've talked in previous chapters about how important social support is for buffering us from stressors and things like that. And so, having a mate helps to ensure that you're not lonely and those kinds of things. Now, of course, you could be lonely with people around you, so it's not perfect, but it helps to buffer. So how do we predict whether a given marriage will be successful or not? Well, we don't do a very good job of it as psychologists, so I'm going to just try and manage your expectations right there. But we do know some factors that go along with longer, more successful marriages. Getting married between the ages of 20 and 30 is associated with better success. Now, that number might sound lower than you would expect. Everybody acts like getting married young is always a negative. But it turns out that, I'm going to go ahead and use Erickson's terminology. Erickson, he argued that you should have your identity completely in place before you attempt to go into an intimate relationship. But he's probably wrong in the sense that if you are really solid in your identity, and part of your identity is going to be based on your singleness, being available to your friends. Like, I'm a really good friend. I'll drop everything and go pick them up at 3 o'clock in the morning and these kinds of things. If that's a really strong component of your identity, and then you bond up with a person in marriage, it's going to be hard to maintain that intensity and that kind of commitment to your friends once you have a life partner that you're making the ultimate commitment with, right? And so when you're younger, you probably don't have those things as part of your identity because you haven't really established that part. And so leaving part of your identity open to be fulfilled by the marriage is probably why being between 20 and 30 at marriage is an advantage. Having at least one child, and especially if that child is a boy, it's more likely that the marriage will be stable. It's sexist. I don't even want to have to say it, but it's statistically true that fathers are more likely to stick with a marriage when they have a son. Children at all, but especially a boy. If their own parents are still married, it boosts the likelihood that a given marriage will succeed. It's not necessarily as simple as I had role models for how to stay married. It's not as simple as that. It's also partly that because the family values marriage, they're going to help that couple to work through the difficulties that are inevitably going to come and help them to put things into perspective. For example, every couple goes through growing pains when they first get married, for sure. Those first couple of years are very difficult when you're trying to figure each other out and things like that. And a lot of times when you first get married, you think, I have picked the wrong person. This is not for me. But if you have couples, your parents, your grandparents who have been married for a long time, and they can say, you know what, it was hard for us at the beginning too. And you're seeing us on the other side. But we had to go through these growing pains also, and you need to turn to each other and get through these growing pains. Again, I'm not saying counsel somebody through something abusive. I'm saying, when the normal growing pains of getting married. Having those kinds of not just role models, but actual support where they can actually help you to see the perspective, that seems to be a really important factor. And then positive effects, if the couple engages in positive communication, even when they're arguing, where they don't name call. I am ashamed to say that part of why I'm upset about the argument that my husband and I had recently is that I snapped at him in an unkind way. I used profanity in an argument. I try not to do it, but I did, and I feel bad about it because I don't usually do that. So clearly I'm on edge also. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, your dad has died, and of course that's my father-in-law for the past 35 years. But I personally, for me, the bigger thing that's been looming is my daughter's health. And so I think we're both on tenterhooks. And I had to tell him, I am sorry I snapped at you like that. Like, that is not how I normally, his little eyes flew open. Like, this is not how I normally talk to him. And he was like, what? And I go, I am sorry. I am on edge, man. And it's not because of what we're talking about. It's a bunch of other stuff. And admitting that actually helped. That kind of positive communication, I'm probably being a little bit more sensitive, actually is really super helpful. So here are some things that have been shown through survey questions to be important in maintaining successful marriages. And notice at the top, number 1 is faithfulness. Let's go ahead and take a break here, and I'm going to come back and we'll talk a little bit about what that means and how come that's so important. So I'll see you in the next video.